I've been staring at this same vanity mirror for 42 years, watching the way the morning light catches the fine dust on my perfume bottles until it fades behind the gray apartment blocks of the city. My name is Clara, and for most of my life, I believed that being indispensable was the same thing as being happy. I thought that by anticipating every need, by smoothing every wrinkle in the lives of those around me, I was building a monument to devotion. But standing here at 74, looking at the silence of a house that no longer echoes with the demands of others, I realized I hadn't built a monument. I had built a cage. Welcome back to Beyond the Horizon. Before we dive into the quiet rebellion of a life reclaimed, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. We explore the stories that happen in the shadows of the everyday, and I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt like a spectator in your own life? Tell me your story in the comments below. Most people think that a midlife crisis happens at 40, involving radical changes and sudden exits. But for me, the realization didn't hit until the quiet years began. I spent my youth as a high-level executive assistant, a woman who organized the chaos of other people's lives for a living. I managed schedules, predicted crises, and ensured that everyone else arrived exactly where they needed to be. I applied that same logic to my marriage with Julian. We were a perfectly choreographed dance. I never raised my voice, because I was too busy keeping the peace. We never strayed from our coastal summer rentals because the logistics of the unknown were too taxing to manage. We lived a life of polished silver and scheduled Sundays. I thought I was nurturing him and myself by curating a world without friction. But when Julian passed away 3 years ago, the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was deafening. It was the sound of 40 years of unexpressed desires. I remember sitting in the kitchen a few months after the funeral, sipping lukewarm tea and looking at a vintage silk scarf my grandmother had left me, a map of the Mediterranean that I had only ever worn as an accessory, never as a guide. It was a beautiful piece, delicate and silk-screened, meant to be admired rather than followed. I realized I didn't know the difference between the scents of a Moroccan spice market and the salt of the Dead Sea. Not really. I had read about them in the travel journals I organized for my bosses, but I had never felt the heat of the desert sun or the grit of ancient dust under my fingernails. I had lived my entire life in a managed environment, both physically and emotionally. I was a woman who knew the etiquette for everything, but the passion for nothing. That afternoon, I did something the assistant in me would have found catastrophic. I walked to a small, cluttered travel bureau, and I didn't ask for a luxury package. I told the man behind the desk that I wanted to go somewhere where my organizational skills were useless and where the air tasted of salt and history. He looked at my manicured nails and my tailored coat and suggested a boutique hotel in Tuscany. I shook my head. I wanted the opposite of a boutique experience. I wanted to feel something that couldn't be put on a spreadsheet. 2 weeks later, I was on a boat crossing the choppy waters toward the Socotra archipelago, off the coast of Yemen. My children thought I had suffered a nervous breakdown. My daughter, Elena, called me incessantly to ask if I had packed my orthopedic inserts. She spoke to me with that cautious, fragile tone people use for the elderly, as if my age had somehow rendered me made of glass. She told me it was reckless. She told me it was unseemly. For the first time in my life, hearing those words didn't make me shrink back. It made me expand. If it was unseemly, it meant it was finally mine. The first night on the island was the most terrifying experience of my life. I was staying in a basic stone shelter near a group of local goat herders who spoke a dialect I couldn't even identify. There were no heavy drapes to block out the stars, no white noise machines to drown out the pulse of the ocean. When the sun went down, the world became ancient and vast. I felt a surge of panic so sharp I couldn't catch my breath. I was thousands of miles from my linen closets, my routine, and my social standing. I laid on a rough mat, listening to the wind howling through the dragon's blood trees, and I realized that for 70 years I had never truly been alone with Clara. I had always been Clara the wife, Clara the mother, or Clara the expert assistant. Without those roles to perform, I was just a woman in the dark, and that woman was a complete stranger to me. I want to ask you something right now. If you stripped away your title and your family obligations today, who is the person left sitting in the chair? As the days turned into weeks, the fear began to transform. It became a sharp, vibrant hunger. I watched the women of the village. They didn't manage their lives. They inhabited them. Their strength wasn't in their ability to serve, but in their resilience to the elements and their connection to each other. One afternoon, an older woman named Mariam signaled for me to help her process wool. My hands, which had only ever typed memos and arranged flowers, was suddenly stained and sore from the raw fibers. I was slow, I was clumsy, and my back ached within 20 minutes. But when we finished, Mariam smiled, showing the deep lines of a life lived outdoors, and shared a piece of flatbread with me. It was dusty and hard, but it was the most honest meal I had ever had. I wasn't performing a social grace. I was just a human being sharing a moment of survival and connection. I spent 3 months moving between the coast and the mountains. I learned that being useful is a poor substitute for being alive. I realized that my perfect life back home had been a beautifully decorated tomb. I had been bearing my curiosity, my anger, and my spontaneity under a blanket of appropriateness. I should be at the charity gala. I should be babysitting. I should act like a grandmother. But what does it mean to act like a grandmother when you realize you've never actually acted like a person? I started to sketch in a notebook. Not the polite watercolors I used to do, but raw, jagged charcoal lines of the alien trees and the weathered faces of the people. I wrote about the sting of the salt spray and the strange peace that comes from being physically exhausted but spiritually wide awake. I was finally becoming a student of my own soul at an age when society expected me to be closing the book. When I finally returned home, the apartment felt like a film set. It was a collection of props owned by a character I no longer wanted to play. I walked through the rooms and felt a profound sense of claustrophobia. The crystal vases, the coordinated cushions, the silver frames, they were just burdens. They didn't represent a life. They represented a cage. My daughter came over the day after I got back, ready to stage an intervention about my erratic behavior. She started talking about the stress I had put on the family, but she stopped when I caught her gaze. She told me later that my face looked different. She said the softness she had always exploited was gone. I told her she was right. I wasn't the woman who would sacrifice her own breath so that everyone else could breathe easier. I was someone else. I sold the house and most of its contents within 6 weeks. I kept only what held a genuine memory and moved to a small, rugged cottage on a cliffside in Cornwall. I didn't do it to hide. I did it because I wanted to be near a sea that was as restless as I felt. I started writing, not letters of apology or thank you notes, but stories. They are messy. They are sometimes bitter. And they are entirely unpolished. But that's the point. For 60 years, I only did things that were elegant because I was afraid of being judged. Now, I embrace the mess. I spend my mornings hiking the coastal paths and my evenings in the local pub, talking to strangers I would have once crossed the street to avoid. I am living a life of profound impropriety, and I have never felt more in control. This is the part of the story where people usually say, it's never too late. But I want to challenge that. It is late. It is very late. I have fewer summers ahead of me than the ones I've already spent. And that is exactly why every heartbeat now feels like a drum roll. If you are waiting for a sign, for a permission slip, or for the right time to reclaim your identity, you are burning the only thing you truly possess. The world will try to convince you that your value lies in how much you can give to others. They will tell you that being a good woman means being an invisible one. But the greatest betrayal is the one you commit against your own spirit by pretending to be content when you are starving. Don't wait for a tragedy to wake you up. The tragedy is waking up and realizing you have no time left to live the answer. Now that I have shed my journey from the vanity mirror to the island cliffs, I want to hear your perspective. What is the one thing you've always wanted to do, but were too afraid of what people would think to try? Is it a solo trip, a creative pursuit, or perhaps setting a boundary you've been afraid of? Drop a comment below and let's start a discussion. Your honesty might be the permission someone else needs to break their own cage. If this story resonated with you, please give the video a like and share it with someone who is currently playing a role they've outgrown. It helps us grow this community of seekers here at Beyond the Horizon. I look out at the Atlantic now, and I don't see duties anymore. I see horizons. I am Clara, and I am no longer the assistant to my own life. I am its protagonist. I don't know how many scenes are left in this play, but I know that every single line from here on out will be my own. I've stopped measuring my worth by the comfort of others and started measuring it by the depth of my own experiences. The polished silver is gone, replaced by the wild wind and the cold stone. I lost 60 years to the perfect life, but I found myself in the rubble of its demolition. And in the end, that is the only victory that matters. Thank you for walking this path with me today. Remember, the horizon isn't a destination, it's a reminder that there is always more of you to discover if you're brave enough to go and look. I'll see you in the next story.